Catherine of Siena. She says, "Speak the truth in a million voices. It is silence that kills." Thank you for being here. It's my pleasure. I'm a SNAP leader and the contact for those abused by nuns. So my goal today is to increase your awareness and understanding of the problem of nuns as abusers and how that abuse has impacted our lives. And the abuse happened everywhere, in schools, in orphanages, in classrooms, in tents, in counseling sessions with therapists who were sometimes religious themselves, in convents, in bedrooms, under blankets. Nuns had their places and times to seek out children and abuse, where all the survivors were betrayed by someone they really loved and respected. And it's hard to get our arms around the fact that nuns are abusers too. You know, women don't do that. Women are called to be nurturers, life givers, to birth, give energy through compassion and love. So when people for the first time hear that a nun raped a child, the ones I've shared with, they want to turn away. It's like, oh no, that can't be. And then, yes, it can. And I was here for the summit. I was able to share that I had 40 contacts from survivors of nun abuse. And this is a year later, and now I've had 90. And the calls keep coming. They never end. Even since being here, I've had 2 more. I'm a survivor of priest abuse and nun abuse. I was abused by the parish priest, raped by the parish priest at age 7. And from that point on, as many of us do, I split. I left a piece behind me and went on. And it wasn't until I was 52 that the memories surfaced. And in time, I confronted my abuser. And there's a whole story around that. But why I tell it is because it connects to my abuse as a nun, which I did not come to terms with until 2 years ago. And that was I will be 80 soon, in May, but I was 78 when, in preparing for a TV program on nuns as abusers, all of a sudden the light went on. Oh, the event that happened in my life when I was a postulant was indeed sexual abuse. And I had never, ever, ever named it. And in the scheme of stories, mine does not carry the horror or the terror that many of the stories I have heard, the 90 that I've heard in the recent year and a half. But it was that as a postulant, we had to walk up the hill to the main chapel for prayers, and then we'd come down and go through a courtyard. And when I was coming down with the other postulants, there are 13 of us, and you never left the line. You went one by one with the novice mistress, and your eyes modestly cast down. Those were the words we used, modestly cast down. All of a sudden, a nun tapped me on the shoulder and called me off the line. Now that in itself was very, very unusual. You never left the line, you never left your group. So that would have been the first time for me to leave my security. She called me into her room. And in those days, it was customary that you kneel down whenever you spoke to a superior, you would kneel in very close proximity to ask or share anything. And I don't remember what she said before or after, but she took my face into her hands and she kissed me all around my face. And then I left. And where it connects to my priest abuse is the feelings were the same. I felt alone, I felt abandoned, I felt confused, I felt used, and lost. And those were very, very much the same feelings as I had as a child. And so, I want to minimize the story and say, oh, that wasn't so bad. But look, I'm 78 and I've carried around that confusion for all those years. And that impacts our lives when we carry these feelings and they're not resolved. So stories have a great power to change us, and I believe they're the greatest gift we have to give to one another is the story of our lives and our journey. What brought us from, there's little Mary, what brought her from there to here. It's what brought each of us to these moments is mystery and grace. So these are the stories that I picked out from the stories I've received. And the first one is from a survivor in our nun support group, and I have permission to share these stories. And it's from Detroit, Michigan, and the stories are from all over the United States. So we're just thinking small, but think globally of this issue. There are thousands of children who were abused. As a 14-year-old entering a Catholic girls' high school, I fervently hoped for mentoring as I sought to grow beyond a deeply lonely and painful childhood. My chosen mentor groomed me sexually over 5 years. I later learned she was struggling with her own narcissism and neurotic demons. Sexual violation took place in classrooms, the school chapel, the convent, and a dormitory. The moral and spiritual journey that Sister Mary Gale inflicted, but extinguished the true flame of my ability to love and live as a strong, empathetic, and open-hearted woman. I am still receiving therapy to address these wounds. Once upon a time, I was devout. No longer. My church damaged and abandoned me, hoarding its compassion and its wealth. This is wrong, and a part of me remains bereft and angry. And this from another. This person was in the convent. She entered as an aspirant at age 13, and eventually she left. And while she was working through her problems to stay or leave, she began therapy with a religious, a nun. And after leaving, she continued to go back. And then she writes, it was in therapy that she stripped off her clothes from her waist up and stripped off mine and began to nurse me. I was told this is therapy. These are just very terrible stories. I've worked hard to make sure that others do not suffer the same abuse and the same PTSD that crippled me and robbed me of valuable years with my young children, and because of many hospitalizations. And this one. I'm going forward as aggressively as possible. They, meaning the LCWR, they have had 50 years to make amends and nothing. And this bullshit with the LCWR has got to be exposed as the apathy it is. The math alone is staggering. The sisters had access to children far more than the priests, and there were far more sisters than priests, and their own commissioned study indicated that 14% of them were sexually abused before entering or after entering. And if between 22% to 33% of victims re-abuse, just do the math. It is terrifying. The enormous number of active sisters in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s far exceeds the number of priests. And the re-abuse shows up in sexuality and sexual and physical abuse. There is very real reason for LCWR to be hiding. And then this from there, I'm often asked, well, do you have very many men calling? Do you have very many women? And there is a sampling of both. Of course, more women, but still a good number of men. And this is from a man. He says her favorite technique was to deny restroom visits in order to force the child to soil himself. Then the psychological abuse would start. Never the girls, always the boys. And that abuse was public and went on until the next victim was assaulted. Why would anyone do that, especially to a child? And the nun would keep me in at recess and climb on top of me. And this one. My son was abused and beaten repeatedly by nuns at the Catholic school he attended. I've contacted an attorney to review our case. Will you please pray for Andrew and his family? So, that's just a sampling of the stories that I hear. And I brought along some pictures of myself as a nun, just to keep us in touch with nuns. This is Sister Mary. And along with this very sad piece, how many of you went to Catholic school? Whoa. And I don't know about you, but I have wonderful memories of a lot of my Catholic education and of the nuns. In fact, that's why I became one. So things are never this or that, they're both. It's not either they're all abusers or they're not. We're human beings and we're a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So that's just a reminder. And then, you probably all had nuns as teachers, and you raised your hand as I did. And so again, we held them as mostly nurturing and life-giving. So with that, I'd like to go to the basic statistics that my friend Dan McNevin from Snap, California, he's, I call him a statistician and a research person, and he and I have done our best in a year and a half to put basic data together. And as I said earlier, it has been like an archaeological dig. If you put Nun Abuse into the internet search bar, nothing comes up. I mean, nothing. And you have to hunt and search, and even when you go to like CARA, which is a research center for theological purposes, and can find very, very little. So I have these, it's for a PowerPoint, but we're just going to be holding them up. And SNAP is in contact with two subsets of abuse within women religious. Nuns who were abused by nuns and minors and children who were abused by nuns. And some more early indicators. 90 survivors have approached SNAP regarding nun abuse. Many are men. Some experienced emotional and physical abuse. Several dioceses are represented by this sample. Fairbanks, Alaska went through bankruptcy. 15% of the accused abusers were nuns. Australia lists nuns at 5% of the abuser pool. In its Royal Commission report, 96 abusers. Bishop Accountability lists 120 nuns as having abused minors. And this is, you know, something to cheer about, because never before have nuns been listed anywhere. So congratulations to Bishop Accountability. And now we have dioceses who are releasing names also, very, very slowly, and one or two at a time. But we have to be happy with one step at a time. And general abuse statistics. In society, less than 1% are registered as sex offenders. 92% of registered sex offenders are men. 85% of victims of sex abuse are girls. The Catholic Church trends. In the Catholic Church, 6% to 9% of male religious and diocesan priests sexually abuse children. John Jay study. 6%. Pennsylvania grand jury investigation, 9%. 85% of victims are boys. 21,000 victims have come forward in 2017 John Jay report plus Pennsylvania grand jury. 17,000 boys, 4,000 girls. Bishops are now publishing lists of accused priests. Many are curated and are deficient. Only a few have published the names of offending women religious. 150 out of 197 dioceses have published lists of male religious and priests. About 20 male religious orders have published lists. No women religious have published lists. And SNAP's effort to establish a list agreement with the LCWR Leadership Conference of Religious Women and UISG International Union Superiors General have been fruitless. If an average of 65,000 nuns have served in the United States over the past 50 years, and 2% have abused, there are conceivably 1,300 abusive nuns, most of whom have not been identified. Because nuns are assigned to geographic regions and generally operate under the auspices of bishops, there likely are an average of 6 or more sexually abusive nuns per diocese. Based on our experience so far, survivors there seem to be more female survivors than male. The last piece is I'd like to read the statement that the LCWR has put out on sexual abuse. And then I want to read the UISG statement. And then come to closure. Here's what they say. LCWR. We encourage persons with grievances involving allegations of sexual misconduct by a woman religious to approach the individual religious congregation involved. We believe that it is in this level that true healing can begin. All right, what's wrong with that? What's missing? What do you think is missing in that statement? Honesty. What's number one? What do you think is the first action the survivor needs to take? Report it? I would say so. Yes, report it to the local authorities. And to me, that's missing. It'd be like the Catholic Archdiocese saying, come to us. If you've been abused or harmed, come to us. I don't think that would be a smart move. And the same with religious communities. It's beautiful, and there is I do agree with talking. And there's a lot of healing can come through that if that's what the survivor wants. So that invitation on the part of religious communities to come, we're willing and we want to speak and mend and bridge. I don't want to minimize that, but number one, these are crimes we're talking about. They need to be reported. So that's the LCWR statement. And then we wrote a letter last year. Well, I wrote letters to the LCWR. I must say I did have several good conversations with Carol Zinn, who's the president. We also wrote a letter to UISG last year before coming here, asking for a meeting. We got, this line was the response I got. And after our time here, the abuse of children is wrong anywhere and any time. This point is not negotiable. Well, that's beautiful. But it doesn't say anything about, well, yes, fine, but what are you doing about it? What actions are you taking? Why will you not work with us? In where did I just put it? LCWR has 663 leaders from religious orders are part of that organization. And the UISG represents 500,000 worldwide orders and 2,000 women religious. But this is what I want to read to you, because I read this last night thoughtfully. And there's a paragraph, and this was a letter written to the meeting on the protection of minors in Rome last year. And in their closing remarks, they say, a message to survivors. And I won't read all of it, but the first lines are very beautiful. And then the last two lines say, we invite you to work with us to put in place new structures to ensure that the risks are minimized. We invite you, the survivors. It's called a message to survivors. Well, I don't like to say this, but that's a lie. They will not work with us. We wrote a letter again 2 weeks ago asking if we could have a meeting. If Tim and I could meet, Tim, the president of SNAP, and I could meet with them. I've received no answer. So to put this in writing, it's their statement on the protection of minors in Rome. We invite you, survivors, to work with us, to put in place new structures to ensure that the risks are minimized. We've tried to do that since 2002 to work with the LCWR and to work with UISG, but we have not been successful. So I'd like to tell them about this today, and I'm not sure they'll open the doors and their arms to us. So with that, I want to break for 10 minutes and ask if some of you or all of you would join us in walking over to the UISG Center building. We're going to knock on the door. We're going to ask for that meeting. And if they say no, we have another piece of the story. It's not the one we're hoping for, but. And to end with that same line, speak the truth in a million voices, it is silence that kills. Catherine of Siena. Thank you.